For my next painting project, I've picked one of the coolest sculpts that I think Games Workshop has ever released. Been looking forward to it. This guy. Space Marine Primaris Chaplain on a bike. Let's check it out. Yeah, I've had this model for a while now, and I just haven't wanted to paint it yet. I just didn't think I was ready. But I'm going to give it a shot in this episode, because after this, it's kind of a larger project, and so I want something smaller, kind of to serve as a palette cleanser in between kind of large projects. So, the Space Marines Primaris Chaplain on a bike. Let's take a look at the sprues. Then we'll get to building. Alright, here it is. The full color instruction book. Nice. We've got a teeny tiny little transfer sheet. Ultramarines, because that's the only Marines. We have this big honkin' bike base. It's a big one. I haven't seen any that are this big. I don't have any Outriders, so maybe the Outriders are about this size, but yeah, they're pretty big. It doesn't have a size. It does not. Okay. Alright, well, let's take a look at the sprues. Comes with two. We'll start off with this guy, because it has a nice big thing on it. So it's got the kind of like a rock formation that goes on the base. It's a base topper, I guess that's what you would call it. We've got the exhaust pipes. Loud cans save lives, said the Space Marines Primaris Chaplain. We've got some of the leg armor right here. And we've got the hull, or maybe it's the chassis. I don't know what it's called on a bike. Maybe it's a chassis. Here we've got the pedals for the bike. Here, oh, okay, that looks like to be one of the wheel wells. Here we have the torso for our chaplain. Here we have a shoulder pad. Here we have another shoulder pad, along with his big ol' Crozius Arcanum. Here we have the arm and the handlebars. And these parts are numbered, although it's a small kit. It probably won't be that confusing, but it's nice that they're numbered anyway. Onto the second sprue, we've got the two, I guess the body of the bike. And then we've got some legs. We've got two Space Marine heads. Oh man. Look at that face. Look at that face. It's mean. And yeah, you could go with the unhelmeted version, but if you have a chaplain, why would you not want that skull face? It's just a Space Marine if it doesn't have the skull face. Here are the two wheels. They're weird. So they're not like a full wheel and they're not half wheels. I guess they're mounted kind of on the side. Akira bike style. Here we have, I guess, another component of the wheels. Maybe it goes back here. Here we have, not sure what that looks like. It's maybe an armor plate. Here's what might be an iron halo. Don't know what that is. Like a gas tank or something? Who knows? Here we have the torso, the back part of it. We have the top of the tome, the book. Oh, that must be what this is. So it's not an armor panel, it's the other half of that tome, that book, that codex, if you will. I'm not sure what that is. Looks like some kind of tubing. And we have the power plant, the leg, and the other wheel well. So yeah, pretty straightforward. I don't expect I'll have a tough time with the build on this, so I won't have a separate build video. I'll just do like a quick build, and we'll go from there. As I work on putting this model together, I noticed a couple of things about this model that really stood out to me, and I thought I'd talk about them here while the video kind of happens in the background. Kind of like think of this as a review, sort of. Not really qualified to do a review since I'm not an expert, but these are just my thoughts about this particular model and its assembly and qualities about that. And what I really wanted to talk about was just the high quality of this model. I've been really impressed with how this model comes together, and I don't mean necessarily from the standpoint of the parts fit well, and they do. Like so far, I haven't seen any parts that are they don't align or they're kind of crooked or whatever. They did a really good job with the molding. Right, there's not a ton of excessive flashing, and where the model is attached to the sprue, it's in places that kind of make sense, and they don't require some tricky sanding. There is some, but there's not a ton. Not like you would find on an old firstborn Marine model. It's really more typical of their more recent work, as would be expected. But the thing that really impressed me and really demonstrates the kind of care that Games Workshop can bring to bear in the kind of model building experience is how this model fits together. And what I mean by that is there's a couple of parts that only attach a certain way. In fact, all of these are, right? But there's only so many ways to build a Space Marine bike. So there's not a whole lot of flexibility, but a lot of the parts really do have to be aligned a certain way, and they have to go on a certain part of the model. So, for instance, the wheels on the bike. You'd figure the front and the rear wheels, they're interchangeable, right? It doesn't matter which one you add to the front of the bike, which one you add to the back of the bike. But you'd be wrong. Apparently, it is important, and I'm not entirely sure necessarily, but there's like a flat part to the bike, to the wheels. Anyway, the whole point is that they go in a certain way. And the model itself is designed so that it won't let you add it a different way. Which is kind of cool. It prevents a lot of potential error that I've encountered before. There's another thing there. So a lot of the parts where they're glued together, they're supposed to be glued together in a certain orientation, and they're engineered such that you can't make a mistake. Like the model itself won't allow you. So it has these little notches and shapes that are designed to fit just that piece and just that orientation, and in no other way. It's reminiscent of something like a USB drive, right? Where it's a good example of this kind of engineering, and I'm not entirely sure what it's called. I know it's a thoughtful process by manufacturers where you can't. The design prevents the user from making a mistake that is costly. So a USB drive, 2.0 and below, you can only insert that into the slot in one way. If you tried to put it in upside down, it wouldn't let you. It's the design choice that influenced 1,000 memes. But it prevents you from doing any damage. And in this case, we're not talking damage, but we are talking about reducing the error associated with building these models, which can be a pretty frustrating experience sometimes, where if the part is designed to go in a certain way, but you didn't have the information you needed to make sure that you followed those directions. And I'm thinking, of the Hellblasters and even the aggressors. Some of these Primaris models, the ammo feeds, they're designed to go just a certain way, and if you deviate at all, then you're going to have disconnected ammo feeds. It's going to look funky, and you're going to hate your life. This model, I don't know if they learned some lessons, but whatever it is, they really took good care of making sure that the user limits the amount of errors they can make in the assembly. And I think that's a wonderful touch. Yes, it limits your ability to attach pieces. Like the wheels need to go in a certain order or place. The footrests, those have to go in a certain way. Even the Primaris Space Marine, like, you really can't twist his torso so that he's like facing one side more than the other. He's attached to the seat in just one way. Now, I don't know if that one necessarily was necessary, but it's there, right? And so it reduces the amount of error that you're exposed to as someone who's creating these models or building these models. I thought it was a really neat approach. Not everywhere, but in a lot of places, this is a very welcome development, and it shows what Games Workshop can do when they put their minds to it. It's a really neat model. I think you're going to have a nice time building this thing. It's unlike the other models that you've built. It's very different. Yeah, I'm just really happy with the job that Games Workshop did, and I mean this completely non-sarcastically. Fantastic job, Games Workshop. Fantastic job. So here's the build, and it's a really neat model. I'm really impressed with the quality of just the whole darn thing. I mean, the sculpt itself is beautiful. There's so much happening here. I just know I'm going to do a horrible job painting it. There's just so much going on here. It should be fun to paint, but I am a little concerned, I won't lie. One of the things I have noticed, this kind of takes the Primaris Marine syndrome kind of to level 11. You know how, like, there's really only one way to attach, to build a Primaris Marine. You can't necessarily move the arms up and down or whatever. This one kind of does that a lot, but I can see why. So, for example, the Space Marines torso, it's locked. It's gonna go facing forwards all the time. They have a little like a molded element that prevents you from twisting the torso, which makes sense, right? Because if you twist the torso, then this arm isn't gonna work, right? My go-to, maneuver is to twist the torso like they're engaging in some action, but I can't do that here because the arm would be out of alignment, and that's because this arm is part of the handlebar. Now, it didn't have to be that way, right? They could have given him an arm with that little kung fu grip thing that you always see in the Firstborn Marines. So, is the sculpt pretty enough to warrant getting rid of the flexibility? I don't know. I mean, my gut kind of says yes, but I don't know. Even the shoulder pads are different, so I can't swap out the shoulder pads with the whatchamacallums. Oh, the Deathwatch shoulder pads. Like, I could, but this is a flatter shoulder pad, and it fits on here kind of differently. I could force the issue and put it on there. Thankfully, I have some Deathwatch iconography that I can add to this, and so it'll be fine for this model. So I guess what I'm saying is that it's a beautiful model. In exchange for that beautiful model, there's a lot of stuff you can't do, that you can't customize, not easily. Like, you could hack away at this thing, but it's not as easy to customize as previous models. So there's just something to be aware of. If you're really a fan of kind of kit bashing and making these things your own, the difficulty level went up. So if you're okay with that, if you're okay with either, working really hard to make this your own, to attach, a different weapon or move the arm around or whatever, then knock yourself out. You're going to have a lot of fun with this kit. If that's not your thing, you just kind of want to move the occasional arm, this isn't going to be your deal. But it is really pretty. I mean, look at this bike. I'm not going to say Akira. Well, wait, I just did. I said Akira. Yeah. All right, so that's the build. I'm going to move quickly over to start the prime. There's a ton of parts on this bike that you really can't glue together because otherwise you're going to have a horrible time painting. So I'm going to start mounting these onto my little painting sticks so I can start priming and get to the painting. Before I begin, I have a bit of a confession to make. This is actually the second time around I'm attempting to paint this model. The first time around, I got kind of far. I did the basing, I did some washing, I did some of the details, and I just was really unhappy with this poor model. I didn't exactly mangle it, but I just was really unhappy with it. I started with a black primer, and I think that was my major mistake. I did the edge highlighting on the black, and it was fine-ish, but it just did not look, it didn't have the quality that I expected out of it. It's particularly on the chaplain, so the guy riding this bike. I did a lot of, it was just really sloppy. So I ended up stripping the model. I used a paint stripper, and I put up a video about the paint stripper in case anyone has ever gotten to this point and thought, you know what, I really need to start over. So that's what I've done. I stripped the model and I've applied some uniform gray primer over all the pieces. My intent here is to have a more nuanced black between the model, like for the bike, and probably something different for the chaplain himself. Now, I've basically separated these out into the sub-assemblies that will work best for painting. The exception to this is the torso. I really believe it's a really good idea to paint the torso separately. Unfortunately, I glued the torso on here, and I glued it so well I cannot take it off. In fact, I tried to use a hobby knife to separate the torso and the hips, I guess, because the hips are part of the bike seat. That's just how this model comes, and that was a bad idea. Wait, no, boom. That was a really bad idea. I cut myself pretty badly. It bled quite a bit. This was a very sharp hobby knife. I was pressing down on the blade to try to just kind of wedge it in between the thing, and my finger slipped off the handle and went just right down the blade. So, if you mess up your model, you can always go back and fix it. Stripped it, the paint came off, it's fine. You can always start again. 2, be very careful around hobby knives. Even if you use them a lot, they can betray you. They're tricksy little hobbitses. In any case, these are the sub-assemblies that I think you should use. So basically everything is separated. And so you're basically going to assemble the bike and assemble the well, not even the full bike, just the body of the bike, not the cowling or the extra stuff that goes on it. And you paint that, and then everything else you kind of paint separately. Once you have everything kind of where you want it, then you can glue everything together. It would have saved me some heartache. The details on the torso are really hard to get in there with a brush to do a nice job. So, you know, I would highly recommend before you start yours, just put yourself in that mindset. You're going to have just a ton of separate sub-assemblies, and that's the way to go. Having said all that, I am going to base this with a glaze of flat black. It's basically just flat black from Army Painter. It's this guy right here. And I've mixed it with a couple of drops of water. And the idea is that when I start basing, it will kind of have variable coverage. I want it a little uneven so that I can have some differences. The differences make the model a bit more visually interesting. And so I'm going to add the first coat of my base, I guess my base glaze. I'm going to add it to everything that's going to be either black or metallic. And that's going to be, you know, a fair amount of the bike for sure. For these kind of leathery parts, just going to use a glaze of brown leather. I sometimes try to get cute with leather on my Space Marines, but given my rate of success with this model so far, I'm going to be a bit more conservative and just go straight up leather. I don't want any more room for mistakes. Kind of just want to finish this model. So the holster for what I'm guessing is a pistol will have the brown leather glaze, as will some of these other parts. I'm going to try to leather up the seats on this bike. I've never actually succeeded in making this a clean job. I'm going to give this a shot again. And I don't know why I find painting the bike seats so difficult. But I've never been able to do a clean job. So this one I'm having trouble with. I had trouble with it the first time I tried with the Space Marine attack bikes, like not the Primaris, the Outrider ones. I haven't done those yet. But like the normal Space Marine attack bikes, I had a tough time with those as well. There's something about the shape, because they're rounded. I don't know, but I haven't been able to do a good job with these at all. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with the containers on our Chaplain's belt. For the weapons on the bike, I'm just going to base that in Dragon Red. Except for the barrels, which I'll leave to be based in black. For the tome, I'm going to go with a skeleton bone. It's kind of this off-white paint. I'm hoping to do something a little different with these kind of important leather parts. So there are other leather parts, but there are some, like, you know, the seats and handles and weapons that are like, yeah, okay, it's just leather. But, you know, this is an important feature of the model. It's like not the magical tome, but like the, you know, it's a it's a big piece of this guy's kit. It's not like a... Anyway, so it's important enough. I'm going to do something special that I haven't done before. Nothing major, but I just want to see what it looks like. Basically, I'm going to make this skeleton bone and then throw a bit of red tone over it. That's red tone is a it's a shade by Army Painter. It's done really well for me with other models. So I'm going to try to just make this kind of a plain looking book, but give it a touch of red. I think that would look pretty neat without complicating my life over much. We'll do the same thing to what I can only imagine is like a scroll holder. Now normally I would have gone with just the normal leather color for this guy, but there's a detail on it. It's got leather straps holding it to the bike, and I don't want to have them the same color. I mean, you totally can, but I'm going to try to let some of these details really live on the model. If I'm unhappy with the way they look, I'll just cover that up. Alright, the bike looks a little bit better. Not a ton better. I expected a bit more, but you haven't seen it because I got rid of all that footage of my original attempt. So far as you know, it looks fantastic compared to that one, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't. I mean, it does look better. I mean, so the seat, I did a better job with the seat. The base layer, I went ahead and just did the entire torso, this bone color, because even when I was brushing on just kind of the ribs, it looked sloppy and it looked kind of gross, and I don't know, I just don't know what's happening there. Even when I do the job correctly, it looks bad. So I just went with this and figuring that I'll let the washes do a lot of the detail work for me, since I can't seem to do it myself. So yeah, all the base is on. So the bike is all black. I've got some red spots. The wheels, the weapons. You'll notice I took off the exhaust pipes. It was kind of preventing me from getting some of the details in here, but also it blocked my ability to do the wheel. So thankfully, I think I should just be able to glue this back on. It's a little damaged, but it's okay. You won't be able to see it. It's fine. Actually, so I think it's this is the part that goes on here. But if I swap it around, it gives it a slightly like a swooped up angle that I kind of like. It's completely by mistake. Like, I didn't realize that would happen, but I think I like the way that looks. And since I'm just going to glue it on anyway, maybe I'll give it that. It looks a little bit more aggressive. I kind of like the way that looks. So I'm going to try to keep that on there. So the bike is based. The pieces like the side armor, these are all based. You notice I went in there with the leather brown. So that's based. The Marine, the Chaplain, he's based. Like here's his arm. Everything that needs a color is on there, so there's no primer showing. Here's the tome. And so I've got the main base for the tome. I've got the main base for the chains. That'll be metallic, but I needed an undercoat of black. And there's a kind of a leather strap. So everything has a base. And rather than jump straight into the highlighting, I think what I'm going to do is hit it with kind of a preliminary wash. because I mean, it's not going to be really for the bike. It's going to be mostly for the torso. The seat, I want to get some depth to those crevices on the seat. The tome, so there's a number of parts that need some washing, and so I'm going to do that as my next step. Once I get the wash in, I'll be able to do some edge highlighting, maybe add some layers, like kind of some middle parts here on the bike thing. But I don't know what color I'm going to use. I think that's... Let me play around with some colors to see what I want this to look like. For the torso, I'm going to go with this strong tone. It's a little darker really than I want, but let me see what it looks like. So here it is before the wash. So I've made an effort to make sure it pools on certain parts. So certainly in the kind of in between the rib, the interstitials, if you will. I think that's what it's called. If I remember my anatomy and physiology days, I think it's called an interstitial, so in between the ribs. But also on the collar, right below the collar, I let it pool. I made sure it pooled there. Didn't necessarily always do that. I kind of want an additional kind of a rib look. And this wash is nice and thick. It has a different look that I could accomplish with just diluting the paint I wanted to use. And it's not straight black. Like, it's got like a brownish tint to it, which I like. It makes it not black. So I'm going to keep that. I think that looks pretty neat. The other thing I'm going to do, you know what? I'm going to use the same wash for the leather seat. It should look different enough. Actually, now for the leather seat, I'm going to go with a soft tone, just to give me a different color there. And if it doesn't work, I can always go over it with a different wash. So here's what the bike seat looks like now. It'll look a little different when it dries, but that's a really nice start. I'll use the same wash for these other leather parts. So here, the holster, I'm going to do the same kind of wash. For this tome, I want to make sure it's nice and leathery, but also want to make sure it has a color of its own. So I'm going to try a little red tone. Another wash from Army Painter. Instead of actually giving it a color, I want to give it the hint of a color. I think that would have a nice look. Don't know that for a fact, but I think it's looking all right. So here's what it looks like so far. I think it looks pretty neat, but I want a slight more pigmentation. So I'm just going to load up my brush and dip it kind of in the middle. I want some extra pigment, but I don't want it to be uniform. I want it to be kind of irregular. So here's what it looks like. Let me see what it looks like when it dries up. And as that happens, I'm going to add some red tone to the weapons here. I've never done this particular wash on my weapons, but I'm starting to think that I've been missing out. I should have been using this or something like it all along. So here's what the bike looks like with the washes over the areas that are going to get washes, at least at this point. It looks pretty decent. I really like the way the torso looks on the Chaplain, and also the leather seat and the leather stuff on the pouches on the Chaplain. They look pretty good. I like the way that it turned out. The red on the weapons, it's a little lighter than I was hoping. I can maybe do another pass with it on that. So I'll probably do that as well. But maybe a dark wash is going to be needed for those. I'm not entirely sure. But I do like what it's done to the red. It kind of deepened the red that was already there. So that's pretty neat. Kind of the same thing here with the gun holster, or the pouch thing. It's given it the brown a nice depth to it. So yeah, I'm liking that. And it's a little more subtle on the Crozius Arcanum, but it's fine. I like it. I did a little bit here on the purity seals. Might need a... Well, yeah, actually, it's fine. The only thing I didn't really like is that if you look at the torso, you'll notice a shine on there that wasn't there before. It's a little glossy. I think the wash maybe dries a little glossy. I'm not a fan of that. But I'm thinking that the varnish that I apply afterwards, it'll take some of that shine down. So I think that's going to be fine. So pretty happy with the way that looks. It's a big difference from the initial pass. And the final kind of result I want to show you at this stage is the book. I'm a little less happy with the way this looks. Maybe I think I need a second coat on it. I want it a little more red than it is. So I think a second coat will help with that. But I think the next phase that isn't about remediation is to add some of the layer paints. And so I need to add some here for the engine compartment. And so I'll start kind of here. So just a little disc. Now you're not going to be able to see most of that. That's all right. Once I add the pipes on here, but the ring will show up, so that'll be nice. The other thing I want to start putting down is just some of the metal components on the body of the bike. The next thing I need to do is to start adding some detail here. I'll start with the console here. There's not a lot of buttons, but there is a screen. It's a little wide enough that it's probably useless. But I'm going to do this in the normal style that I've adopted for these things. So I'm going to use a very light gray wash. So it's mostly water. And so I'm putting this on a black background. I'm not undercoating it in white because I want it to look like a CRT screen. You know, those old-timey screens where it was just a black monitor with some green text. So with the wash, I gave it like a really light green tint, so it looks like it's kind of a green glow. Once this dries, I'll add, I don't know, a grid or some kind of something on there that the chaplain is reading. The other thing that I want to do to this console is to prep it for these buttons. And to do that, I'll need to do just a dab of this undercoat. This is white. And I'm using white so that when I add color to it, it's a bright color. Otherwise, it's kind of muted and you really can't see it. This requires kind of steady hands. But thankfully, the surface tension of the paint is such that you can just dot it, and it usually adopts the shape that it's dotted on. So you can kind of clearly see here it's a triangle, and here it's a circle, down here circle and squares. I didn't actually do any strokes, I just touched the tip, and the buttons are small enough that that one little droplet of paint spread to the edges of each of their shapes. So that makes things a lot easier. Once this dries, I'll add a couple of different colors. I'm going to start to add some of these gold details. So some of these things need some gold. And so I'm using a metallic gold. I think it's greedy gold from Army Painter. Just did a little bit of dilution, and I also added just a dash of black, so that I wanted like a darker gold, and that seems to have done the trick before. Just makes it a slightly different shade of this metallic black. And by thinning it down, it allows it to flow a little better. So that's what the gold color looks like. It's still got plenty of shine in it. I think what I'll probably do is I'll add a little blue tone to it, since it is kind of a power weapon. It's not just a blunt object. I'm sure it's imbued with something. So I'll give it some kind of tint to make it kind of a bit more visually interesting than the big old monolithic block of gold. I also did kind of the base of the pommel and the little strap here for the leather. I did those in gold as well, just to kind of keep things consistent. We'll do the same thing here with these insignia. But I'll do a very light brush. Let me move these out of the way. I'm going to do a very light brushing on this. Essentially, it's an overbrush. I feel like overbrushing is a pretty nice technique. It works really well with metallic paints. It helps you get the paint exactly where you want it and nowhere else, usually. Certainly more effectively than a normal brush on. But it really only works when you have raised parts, kind of like the sunburst pattern here. So it's a bit like dry brushing, except it's, you're not drying your brush, you're just adding very little to your brush and then using very light strokes so that you're only touching the raised surfaces. It's a pretty neat technique. It allows you to get some interesting results. Obviously, it takes practice like everything else in this hobby. Alright, those are my handlebars with the control surfaces, or the control unit. I'm holding it at a weird angle because my camera does not want to focus on it well, but yeah, it's just fighting me. Anyway, so it's done, and so is a lot of the metal painting that I've been doing. So that's what it looks like with the paint and a little bit of dark glaze. I tried a little of the red glaze. It didn't really do what I wanted. So I'm really close to being done. Here's the tome that he's jealously guarding on top of the bike. It's looking alright, and I gave it some gilded pages. So it's got the gold color, the gold paint, and it's got, so I did the same thing with the chains, and then I did some dark tone over the wash, and so they're pretty much finished. There's only one step left to do, and that is to do some edge highlighting. It's a part that I kind of struggle with quite a bit, but you know, practice makes, well, maybe not perfect, but practice makes better. So I'm going to give the bike some edge highlights using the uniform gray paint. Now, a lot of these highlights aren't necessary because they go under, I think it's cowling. I don't know what the technical name for it is. That armor paneling that goes over the body. I don't really know what it's called, but that stuff is going to cover some of these edge highlights, and that's fine. I'm putting them on there just because there might be some of these that you could see kind of underneath another part or what have you, and so they're relatively easy, so it doesn't kill me to do them, just in case you can see them later. So the edge highlighting is just a little bit of dry brush kind of a technique over the harsher angles. There, don't need them a lot on when you paint with glazes, but sometimes it could help. I think for this model, particularly since the edges are so well defined for the most part, it doesn't kill you to do some edge highlighting. Any of those you can see will end up looking nice. Now I'm messing up quite a few of these here, but they'll be covered up for the most part. This guy is basically all done. I'm going to put some stuff together. Well, I say basically. I realize I forgot a couple of details. A couple of parts like the head, and there's probably some doodads that stick elsewhere on the model. So I'll just go ahead and start gluing some stuff on, because it's basically finished. And so far he looks a lot better than my original attempt, so I'm pretty happy with how this is turning out. It's finally done. The Space Marine Chaplain on a bike. He's all painted up and ready, well, ready for my model's case where everything ends up going. It was relatively straightforward. It was a relatively easy model to paint, assuming you did it right. So for me, it took until the second time to get it right. But this paint job, I'm a lot more happy with. I think the thing that made the biggest difference was the discovery of the washes. So the washes I used here are different from the washes I normally used. So normally I just watered down some of my regular acrylic paint, but the washes that you can buy, I think they're mixed differently. They're a little thicker, and so they tend to do a better job, at least so they stick. I don't know, they look different. I think the other thing that helped me was to isolate the torso of the Space Marine and really just make it one color, and the details, you know, I left the details to the wash. There's a couple of things about this model that I don't quite get. So the front wheels don't really go into the rock formation the way they're supposed to. I kind of had to bend down the wheel for it to fit, and that kind of broke the model a bit. I'm really unhappy about that. And the legs are a little hard to place. So assembling the model presented me more challenges than actually painting. So yeah, I had this model for a long time, and I kind of hesitated on painting it because I thought it was going to be more complex, and it really wasn't. It was fairly straightforward. So yeah, I enjoyed the experience of, basically starting again. Not so much enjoyed it, but I'm glad I had that experience, because without it, I would have, ended up with a cruddier looking model than I ended up doing. I even went ahead and added some more detail to the face of the chaplain than I would normally have attempted. So I gave him kind of a goatee, and I gave him some eyebrows. It looks pretty decent. I can't complain about that. I like the way my reds turned out on this model. And I really like the bone color. The combination of the white bone, the skeleton bone, and I want to say it's the strong tone. I think the combination of those two gives it like an old skeleton look. So yeah, the second time around, I think I did a better job painting this. I'm glad I attempted that. So yeah, I hope you picked something up. Thank you for watching Your Average Bear. If you have any comments about this model, any ideas of what I could have done better, go ahead and write me a comment. At this point, I reply to almost every comment that I see, although I don't see all the comments. The YouTube filtering is a little weird for me right now, so some comments I never see. I know they're there, but I can't see them. So I'm working on that a little bit. And if you enjoyed this, consider giving this channel a subscribe. Maybe you liked this video specifically. Both of those actions might help other people get exposed to this channel and maybe enjoy it as much as you potentially do. Thank you for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Be nice to yourselves and each other.